One of the most infuriating things for a DM to do is to reward good gameplay with bad behavior. What that means, we're gonna see much more in depth in this post, so let's have a look. I really should have said that the DM of this story has not DM'd the campaign of this scale before. Also, the campaign is built in such a way where we rotate DMing every 3 to 4 sessions while keeping the same characters. This is the 4th episode of this campaign, meaning 3 of us already DM'd for these characters, and the characters are meant to continue in many more mini-campaigns to come. The reason why I stayed in the campaign is simply because I have fun playing alongside the DM of the story, when he's a PC and I did not intend on burning all the bridges because of one frustrating experience, and I also did not want to discourage the DM completely as he is very new to DMing, and I know for a fact he worked long and hard on this campaign. Before we begin, I would like to say that all people involved are my dear friends and do not wish for any hate towards the people involved. Well, here it goes. The campaign was a 3-shot by a good friend of mine, and besides me, a life domain cleric female elf, there were 3 more of my friends whose classes and race are irrelevant to the story. In the first session we arrived on an island and quickly figured out that we're in a dread domain of some sort that was ruled over by an evil king that once conquered the land for reasons yet unknown to us. Shortly after arrival, we were ambushed by a group of wraiths, and me being a cleric surrounded by undead creatures, I went with the good old combo of Spirit Guardians plus Turn Undead on later turns. My moment of glory did not last long, however, because on the second round, I was an unfortunate victim of a, later admitted, not so random crit, for far too much damage for me to be able to pass the concentration saving throw. The fight went on, I healed myself up from critical health, and did the only logical thing. Cast Turn Undead. To my surprise, the vast majority of the mobs failed their save and were thus forced to run away from me. This, however, created a problem as the DM had cooked up a story where this was not supposed to happen. The wraiths that at this point were very far away were quickly replaced by another pack of wraiths that in just one turn were all instantly killed by a shaman NPC appearing out of nowhere and thus saving us. A lot of new DMs kinda go with this sort of safety net, let's call it, of introducing a cool character when in time of need to the PCs. Now, depending on how it progresses from there, it can either become a very annoying DMPC or an interesting ally or a quest giver or something of the sort. It really depends how the DM handles it from that point on. One character that takes care of the problem is not an issue. The same character that appears 5 million more times, however, and does everything for the party, that is a very bad flag. And it just kinda kills the mood of the game. The adventure went on. We arrived on a village, were given several quests in order to find out more about the Dreadlord King, and a way into his castle, where we had to defeat him in order to escape the Dread Domain. Next encounter had us fighting a boss whose abilities were heavily based around charming the players, and so I did the only logical thing. Cast Calm Emotions on us, and thus granting us immunity to the status effect. However, this was not supposed to happen. The DM, now at a loss on how to make the boss challenging, got mad at me for ruining his fight for the second time. This just shows the inexperience of a DM, and a lot of people can take this the wrong way, but in that moment, if your only reaction and response is to be frustrated at your players, you straight up have failed as a DM. It doesn't mean that you're a bad DM in hindsight, but it means that you have a lot to learn. The best thing that can happen to a DM is for the players to thwart their plans or even straight up completely destroy them. There's nothing more satisfying, if anything, for the players, and a lot of the times for the DM as well, even if they do say, for example, I can't believe you actually did this was supposed to be such a bad big boss and you just made it a joke. This will just make your players so much more ecstatic. And at the end of the day, it should make you feel proud as a DM as well, because your players are just so invested and interested in the whole thing that they think and pay attention to everything. These are my 2 thoughts on the matter, and these are very big signs of a very inexperienced DM that just wants to tell a story. However, you have to keep in mind, your players will play your story. You can't just narrate and keep narrating and keep narrating. The next session I was feeling a little guilty, and so I stuck to only healing spells and damaging cantrips. The DM would also tell me to save my spells for Remove Curse, as the spell was apparently needed for the next part of the story. At this point, you're not playing D&D. You can't expect them to do everything you want, and that's the magic of D&D. Nothing is gonna go according to plan, and that's what makes it magical. That's what makes it fun. Again, this DM appears to be very inexperienced and doesn't know how to handle, or doesn't appear to know how to prepare for unexpected events, and that is definitely what they need to work on and figure out. The fights that session were brutal, especially one fight against the King's Son in an arena, where essentially every attack would block healing effects on the victim until the next turn, and also this time not a single turn undead would go through. The fight ended up with all of us alive, in no small part thanks to the DM heavily and openly fudging rolls. Okay, I know I'm cutting in a lot, but I have a lot of thoughts on this specific matter. Fudging rolls is not a great look, however, it's also not a bad thing. Fudging rolls is not really fair at the end of the day, not for you as the DM or even your players. If death comes in the game, it does. If a bad roll comes, it comes. However, there's a few scenarios where I wouldn't say fudging rolls is bad. It depends heavily on the party and how new the players are and so on. A lot of the times, if you're inexperienced, you might want to fudge rolls because the encounter you created, for example, is way too overpowered. Again, they are a new DM, we'll see how the story goes, but you shouldn't show that you fudge rolls, and you should make it believable for the party if you intend to. Now let's say there's a situation where a character player is very close to death. It could be a good thing to let it happen, but depending on the situation and the players and the overall campaign and the tone of it, sometimes it might be better to just fudge it a little bit. Or, if you're an experienced DM, you'll know how to go around it and what options you can give the players to deal with it. The campaign went on with several more fights, and at this point I was promoted to the party healbot. We fought some baddies, did some puzzle where I dared to cast Divination, which resulted in the spell being banned. Anyway, back to being a healbot, I guess. And we also had to make friends with a tribe of friendly ghouls, because that was how the story was supposed to go. Never mind me being a cleric of Kellenborg, because I was very clearly told that I had to leave the ghouls alive for the story. I kept my frustration mostly to myself, only asking the DM for no more anti-heal mechanics, since that was kind of all I had left at this point. But I was growing bored and sick of what my character had become. Again, this is just infuriating in so many different levels. You cannot be a DM or a good DM if all you're gonna do is just tell a story. There's no point. People can just go watch a story, watch a movie. There's no point in just listening to a D&D story like this if you're just gonna block your players from doing anything, considering D&D is basically the tabletop that you can do everything. There will be consequences, of course. However, you can do everything, and that's the point. You should have the freedom to do whatever you want and play the way you want. Now, this is one of the bigger red flags. If a DM tells you you can't do this, this is banned, this is that. That is such bullshit, and they shouldn't be a DM. Instead of them just getting mad at PC and starting to ban spells and character features, they should just work on the bloody game and their story and their setup and their outcomes. All you need to do is spend a little bit more time and think, what if that happens? Sure, let's say they are new and they don't know the outcomes. However, they should have a general idea of what's gonna happen. Otherwise, it's just a linear game with one path, and the players don't matter. They might as well just listen, nothing else. And so eventually we stormed the king's castle, fighting side by side with our ghoul allies and finally meeting the king. We were then told that the king conquered the island for a magical water stream that would save his dying wife. The description of the long-dead queen was strangely familiar to how I described my own character, however, and thus my backstory was out the window. The king proclaimed me a reincarnation of his dead wife, and I got a quick confirmation of this from Kellenborg because I was trying to convince the king that I was in fact not, and that would go against the story. The king, angered that I would kill our son in the arena, still begged me to join him yet again in this life. We killed the king, however, me being so frustrated, I simply browsed my phone for the majority of the fight. hoping that my character would die here, since for me the idea of my character was already gone. However, the DM got upset at me a couple of times for not paying attention to the events of the story specifically crafted for my character's development. Now this is another flag, and quite a big one in this case, and just shows how immature this DM is in their storytelling. It is not a good idea to take a character's backstory and completely alter it to fit your own narrative. It can be done to extents, and you need to be very careful how you present it. In the end, I grew disgusted with my character and felt like I was simply a DM's NPC that casted spells only when he needed me to, and to serve as an important part of DM's big reveal about the king's backstory. I never got to feel like a hero in the whole campaign, and between being reduced to the party's healbot and an unwanted addition to my backstory, all this simply killed my idea of the character. And post. There's nothing more frustrating than a DM that doesn't listen to its players. You can tell your story, but if you keep shutting down all of your players and doing whatever you want, you're just gonna get dropped eventually. I'm not trying to say that they're a bad person or a bad friend, but their DMing for sure can improve a million times over. They could not adapt or plan for the party's shenanigans, let's say, which was not even that, they were just playing the game. But the moment something didn't go according to his story, he started losing it. The truth remains, they were not prepared and they didn't try to learn or set up anything for the campaign. All they did was they had a little twist and they started to alter everything to their own narrative. I cannot believe that the DM wouldn't know what a cleric can do, especially when most, if not all, of your session consists of undead creatures. But again, the biggest flag and the biggest gripe that I have with this DM is that they basically didn't let PC play their character. There is nothing more that says that you failed as a DM if you cannot adapt in a situation and you start getting mad at the players. Regardless, that's it for now, and I hope the DM and PC can talk this through and maybe share some thoughts and just grow from this entire ordeal.